Welcome back to Network Africa. The ICC has lost its direction, and this is according to South Africa's Deputy Minister, as the country plans to bow out as a member of the court, even as the government faces criticism for ignoring a court order to arrest Sudan's president earlier this year. Obed Papela says the ruling African National Congress wants to withdraw after following certain processes. Sudanese President Omar Hassan al-Bashir, accused of genocide and war crimes, visited the country in June, but was allowed to leave despite a court order to detain him. The government last week asked the ICC for more time to explain why it allowed this to happen. But then again, the ruling party over the weekend resolved to leave the ICC, with Bapela saying powerful nations trample human rights and pursue selfish interests. I spoke to Professor Frank Viljoen, the director of the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria earlier, and he says the position expressed by the ruling party is not necessarily South Africa's position on the issue.
Let us just be very clear where we are in the process. This is a decision by the African National Congress, National General Council. In other words, our leading political party's highest decision-making organ has decided that that is the view that they hold. That does not mean that the law has changed or that South Africa has actually now already, reversed its participation in the ICC. They have suggested something that now has to be taken up in the political process, in Parliament, and by the executive. It is likely, because of the majority of the party, that this will actually come to fruition, but I just want to make very clear that there still is a long, protracted national debate and deliberation that is required. And personally, I think that there has to be many more views heard and deliberations engaged in before we get to the point where any action is taken. But if we should actually then, leave the ICC, it has grave implications, among others, because South Africa is one of the few states in Africa that had actually domesticated the ICC statute. So we have a domestic law that actually integrates these processes and procedures as part of South African law. It does mean that if before, in a sense, we should be able to go to the international fora and, withdraw, we should also be going to our national parliament and undo a law that we have put in place there already.
So, but why do you think the ruling party suggested this move? First, it did say that asked the ICC to give South Africa more time to respond to the questions ICC asked, asking why did you let Omar al-Bashir escape or leave the country as well? South Africa asked for more time to explain that, and now it's come back to say, you know what, we may just leave the ICC. Why this back and forth?
I think, even within the ANC, I think there are some, dissenting views, but it is part of South Africa's positioning of itself in terms of advancing the view that it, puts much pay to solidarity within an African context and in the context of the South more generally. So this is part of South Africa's strategy to position itself really as an important, a key role player within the global South within Africa. And I think it is very unfortunate that the issue here that actually gives South Africa the opportunity to take this stand is linked to someone who has committed indefensible human rights violations. And he, in a sense, becomes a hero in the process of anti-colonial kind of rhetoric.
That's exactly the point. And you have written extensively about this issue. Omar al-Bashir is seen internationally as a criminal. The genocide that happened under him, that claimed scores of lives, cannot be just look past like that. He's wanted. So, I mean, is South Africa standing in the way of justice, finding justice for the millions of lives lost during this genocide by not helping to arrest Omar al-Bashir?
Yes, you could say so. I mean, South Africa is not the only state party so far that has allowed Omar al-Bashir to enter a country and leave again without being arrested. But in South Africa, there was a particular challenge, there was a particular judgment, and we all know how that ended. So it's very unfortunate. But I suppose, South Africa's government would also argue that it is really about double standards which are being applied internationally. That you have the UK, you have, the USA, maybe even now Russia, that are all implicated in international conflicts, but have never really been investigated in terms of the potential atrocities that had been committed. But my response to that is a very simple one, and that is, yes, it may be true that there are these double standards, but you cannot use that argument as a counterweight to the rationale for why the ICC is there, namely to defend the rights of victims and to ensure that the principle of accountability is reinforced in international law. So it is really ultimately a choice. You are choosing between the value of solidarity and the value of human rights. And the wrong choice, in my view, has at the moment been made by the ANC.
Well, you have been listening to Professor Fran Viljoen, is the Director, Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria, talking about what the ruling party said in South Africa, that's the ANC, about the possibility of leaving the International Criminal Court after so much criticism of the non-arrest of Sudan president. In other news, for the second time since independence, Guinea has concluded another round of peaceful elections. Millions of Guineans came out to vote their preferred candidate on Sunday, followed by a collation and counting which is still ongoing. Guinea is Africa's leading producer of bauxite, the raw material for aluminum, has a history. That country has a history of election violence linked to ethnic tensions, but so far, 2 elections since independence that is deemed fair and free, including a 2010 vote that brought President Alpha Conde to power after military rule. We're still talking here about the elections that were shrouded in violence. But Sunday's elections was free and fair, as many people have said. The streets were calm in the capital, Conakry, and elsewhere. Plainclothes policemen stood vigil at schools and patrol stations transformed into voting booths where some waited for hours in the rain to cast their ballots. We'll take another short break on Network Africa. And a Zimbabwe drought adversely affects maize harvest in the country. We will have the latest from Zimbabwe.